Okay, running a little bit late, so we will jump right into it. First thing that struck me just in preparing for this and talking a little bit with Mark and Eric is, we have brands in America, and there's no place that is more I would say, in certain ways, provincial and myopic than Hollywood, strangely enough, when it comes to looking outside and thinking that Hollywood is the center of the universe. I think that has changed over the past 10, 15, 20 years. It should never have been the case because the truth was the vibrancy of the global culture and the importance of the global audience. When you're at a point where a movie like Warcraft comes out and 90% of the $500 million in revenue has essentially come from another part of the world, it's about time that Hollywood figured that stuff out. So we think in terms of our brands, we think in terms of our cultural heroes, our content being so important to us. And then the world started changing, and we started becoming much more of a global entertainment world. And we have two gentlemen, Eric Mika, who is Senior Vice President with LeEco, and Mark Rafalowski, who is EVP of Dick Clark Productions. Dick Clark Productions is a name you know if you're in a certain age group because you remember Dick Clark, who was an amazing superstar of television, but you know the company more by the other names of the programs they do. We know the Golden Globes at Variety very, very well, and I think the whole world does, as in addition to a lot of hit shows. And Eric, your company, when we started talking yesterday, preparing for this, you said something really interesting. You said people call us the Netflix of China, but Netflix should be called the LeEco of the United States. Can you explain? We'll start there with what your company, the background is, and the focus of the company.
Absolutely.
For those who don't know it.
No, absolutely, and then I really want to learn what Dick Clark Productions is all about, too. That's the issue when we look at China. In general, is that what's a well-brand company or product or talent in the United States doesn't always translate immediately over to China. And whether it's a massive brand like the Golden Globes, which we take for granted here in the United States, or the Grammys, it takes a lot of marketing skill to do that. But to your question is, what are we? In 2004, when Netflix was certainly established and working in 2004, but it was still putting DVDs in the post, in the mailbox. In 2004, LETV started basically the technology of streaming and building a library of films and television. And today, if we fast forward, that component of our business in 2004 now hosts La Musique, Le Sport. Both these separate companies hold more rights than any other company in the United States or around the world for live streaming and streaming what we call O2O, which is online to offline. And I'll get into the other things as we move forward. I don't want to monopolize the board here.
We're going to jump around back and forth here and try to cover a huge subject in a short time. That's the gig. We'll do it. Mark, Dick Clark Productions, tell me your 5 biggest programs. Maybe 10, because you have a lot of shows.
Well, So You Think You Can Dance is a show that actually was the reincarnation of Dick's original show, American Bandstand. For years, we had looked at how to, bring it forward to the pre-millennial audience, and it had turned out that dance was a great format and Stars produced it in China, as a matter of fact, and paid for the format and everything. It wasn't stolen. It was actually, a good business deal. And we've, the brand is played all over the world. But the Golden Globes is in about 240 some territories. So from a worldwide standpoint, basically, Golden Globes has, I think, the biggest exposure and is The first is the only, like the BAFTAs are the British, official awards and the Oscars here. The Globes kind of spans, it's the only neutral, again, the press.
Yeah.
And I think that has played out and continues to grow worldwide. And the American Music Awards, of course, which Dick created, and the Billboard Music Awards, which we do. Amazingly enough, another big in the U.S. show is the Academy of Country Music Awards, which
Yes.
every year we have usually 3 of the top 5 spots. It's the Oscars, the Grammys, the AMAs, ACMAs, and Golden Globes.
Yeah.
So
Is there an overseas opportunity for something like that with country music? Do you have an overseas
country music, no. I mean, that's the one thing.
No.
Unfortunately,
It's a multi-billion-dollar business, but it's the U.S.
It is just,
Don't give up. Don't give up.
Canada and the U.S. and Australia, amazingly enough.
Well, that
Keith
is-
Urban goes a long way.
But what's kind of interesting is there's a huge country music audience in both the UK and Germany, but I'm pulling you off track.
That's all right.
Yeah. The other thing we were talking about was with the shows you have and the plans for working in a place like China, you were saying that it's almost entirely looking at opportunities for localization or local content.
Absolutely.
Explain that a little bit for us. Or put a little meat on the bone.
3 years ago, when our current management team took over the company, we bought the company back from Dan Snyder, we had a vision. And it's something that I tried to talk to Dick about way back in the late 90s. But the reality was, when I looked into the marketplace to see where our shows were being played, we were distributed by an old school distributor, Alfred Haber, who's been around forever. But, putting the American Music Awards and Globes and Billboard Music Awards on CCTV, so you're reaching a 50-plus, Tier 3, Tier 2 city audience. You're not reaching the millennial. So what I found very quickly is that the millennial Chinese had very little knowledge of any of our brands. So
It sounded good that they were in a territory, but the reality.
well, that's what everybody always.
Yeah.
Even the reality of the Oscars using that BS number that they use, they didn't even. The Oscars was not live. I mean, we could show statistics which show the Globes outperforms the Oscars in China, but stepping aside from that, the whole point was, where are the millennials seeing this? How do you reach them? And we wanted to integrate and look at, like, how do we get their attention? Because, a lot of this music isn't getting there. And most of the music is getting there, but with the Globes, for instance, a lot of the movies haven't been seen, a lot of the TV shows haven't been seen. So how could somebody in China, how could a 24-year-old in China really know what transparent is? It's like, they don't know they wouldn't know what to vote for, they wouldn't know what to care for, they wouldn't, and
Nothing. There's no magnetism pulling them into the show.
Exactly. So
That's because we don't own it yet.
So one of the first things we did was integrate a red carpet, positioning with China, a group that I've been in business with there, Fanzatong China Branding Group. We, reached out to the brands and met with Bessie Lee, who runs WPP China, and, wanted to see what brands, wanted this association. Because we are bringing Hollywood and music and so what we looked at the time, this was 2 years ago, was looking at an International Artist Award and an International Song Award for the AMAs. And, we found at the time Zhang Jie, Jason Zhang, his statistics from that year were like off the charts. It would have blown away Bruno Mars and Justin Timberlake or anybody else. How many, like Pitbull, Armando is so good and he's so great of a host, and it's the only time he was like, and a billion, like he couldn't say, like he was just like saying these statistics can't be true, yet they were.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to show was that, we wanted to shine a spotlight on China, on an artist, and then on a song, which we've been given a lot of grief over because the song was kind of like a Macarena, Chinese Macarena version. It was called Little Apple by the Chopstick Brothers. But the reality was it had near
I love novelty records.
like 1 billion downloads, and literally the
Nothing
government.
wrong with that.
No, and there would be flash mobs of middle-aged women who would shut down streets to doing the dance.
Super. Now, Dick Clark Productions, the different ways that you monetize what you've just described to me are these brand partnerships?
Brands, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's the difference between license fees that were being paid, which were not great.
That's what I thought. There's more money over here than there is over
And,
here.
and so for me, it was very simple. It's like, who is going to get the most value out of these associations and the brands?
Jumping around a little bit, because that's the way my mind works, Eric and I were chatting just before this panel, and Eric said, I think the pace of acquisitions, China buying things going to slow way down. However, the big news yesterday was your company just bought an American company for $2 billion. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that's why I said it's going to slow down. I don't think we can,
It's not stopping.
we can keep that up. But I see that Bennett's in the audience, so he's maybe going to help us on the next acquisition as well. There's 2 reasons I would come to Pasadena, and that's certainly to see Rebecca. Thank you very much for inviting us, and to see East West Bank. So happy to be here. No, I think it's just natural. I think there's, China is going to start focusing on China. We have a saying within our company, as the world moves east, we're moving west. And that's why you see this acquisition here in the United States.
I should explain, you bought the TV manufacturer Vizio.
Vizio. And the reason, the logic behind this is, apart from that in China, the company was founded as a content company, technology, internet company. We quickly, in China, progressed into many different areas. But one is what I call the holy grail of where we believe the industry, global industry, will end up. And that happens to be with mobile devices, smartphones, and smart televisions. Of course, it all exists, but what doesn't exist around the world is the ecosystem that we've developed, which is connectivity. And we're taking it one extra step further, which is we believe connectivity goes into not just your pocket or on the wall, but also the most important places in your car. And so we've also have strategic relationships that we've developed with Faraday Future, which is the autonomous smart car, which is being developed here in California, with Aston Martin in the UK. And in China, we've created our own smart car autonomous driving called the C-Car as well. And what the vision and the goal here is that content, will flow. I was about to say drive, but drive the devices. The devices that LeEco makes and LA TV televisions are really truly designed for the consumption of content. The technology in the phones are fast, the screens are large, and it's comfortable. And so we truly believe that this is where the future is. And as far as content is concerned, and sticking with what this is about and branding and so forth, we'd love to work with Dick Clark Productions. I'm sure we'll end up, because a lot of this is about marketing and taking a brand and how do you excite, whether it's how do you excite the Australian audience, is no difference than how do you excite the Chinese audience to come to your device and to watch the content. It really has to do with marketing.
It's not the same in terms of how you do the marketing, but the basics of the challenge are the same. You have to figure out how to do the marketing.
No, absolutely. And we have, within our ecosystem in mainland China, over 750 million users that go through our entire ecosystem. So whether they're on our phones or the television, that's our audience. And we actually refer to them as fans, because when they're inside the ecosystem, whether they're the car or they're using the phone or a television, they're suddenly a fan of our brand itself, LeEco, because there's so much that we could offer. We even have a smart bicycle that can compete with another smart bike in Shanghai or another part of China through the internet connection. Wow. And a part of the marketing that we would do is if you acquire the bicycle, you would automatically qualify for premium content on all of the bicycle races in the world, so you can get live streaming from the Tour de France. So suddenly you're captured into our ecosystem.
It's like it's connectivity 5.0 or something, because everything is connected. I want to talk about localized marketing, which is something you and I chatted about yesterday. But before that, while we're still on acquisitions, Mark, it was reported a while back before Guggenheim that you were in talks with the Chinese about a purchase. Was there any truth to that possibility of that happening? Were there any discussions whatsoever?
I really can't speak, sorry, I can't speak to it, but
Really?
there's certainly been tire kicking.
Okay. Assuming in your role as one of the top business executives in our industry that you are apprised of and keep up with and are, integrally involved in learning about business with China, putting that particular deal aside, are there lessons you have learned in the past 5 years about the international marketplace or the Chinese marketplace that you feel your company right now is acting on?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, again, it's the localization of the brand and making it resonate, within whatever country it is.
Okay.
Because...
Well, now we're on the same page, and I want to ask you both the same question.
Exactly.
You use the term localized marketing. You pointed out, Eric, that in America, when we market a blockbuster movie, this is a number that I find that people don't really know about movies. A lot of people read the budget of the Steven Spielberg movie was $150 million, or the budget of Tarzan was $180 million. What they generally don't read is the other number, which is the global marketing of the movie. The budget was $150 million. 175.
And different. I happened to have dinner with Zhang Jie last week when he was in town, and here's the segue for that. And somebody else sent me a picture on the Star Trek. Some of the Star Trek posters in China. There's a picture of Zhang Jie, almost as though he's the star of the show, because for the Chinese soundtrack it was made for China, and he sang a song within it. And again, that he was, had a concert last week in Beijing in front of 40,000 people. So it's like that, to Paramount.
Great example.
Yeah, to Paramount's, I would say they're recognizing that was very important in their marketing effort in China.
And to follow up on what we were talking about a second ago, in terms of localized marketing, I sort of understand that's a brilliant example of marketing a feature film. What about the kinds of programming that Dick Clark Productions currently does? Are there any lessons or examples of things you've learned about marketing to that audience that you think are significant?
Integrating social media continuously is one of the big deals, and it's why we've used China Branding Group, because they control like 100 different of the top celebrities, from Taylor Swift on. And it's that, that fan base, the Chinese fan base of the Western stars, understanding what they're consuming, what they're paying attention to, then how it relates to their showing up on the red carpet of the Golden Globes. So, then the red carpet of the Golden Globes has as much, credence as, anything else we could do on the marketing standpoint.
It has to be relevant and
Yes.
not be just completely like, why am I watching this?
Right, and for the Chinese feed of the American Music Awards 2 years ago, again, we got grief for this because people had never seen it before, hadn't done it before. We streamed live during the commercials the awards to the two Chinese artists, because in America nobody knows who they are, nobody knows what the song was, yet in China it's relevant. So we adapted for the stream, and that was an adaptation to the marketplace. That's it.
Eric, pick up on that for me, because this conversation did start with you, where you were talking about it's not TV marketing, it's all internet marketing.
Yeah, for us it is. We also own a company called LeVision, which is here in Los Angeles. It's our production distribution company. One of the things that you may be reading or hear of, we've just done we're producing with Johnny Moe, The Great Wall with Universal. And again, it sort of picks up on this whole localization. It's a global film, very big budget, It's more than just a co-production or a co-finance deal. It really is bringing together a brand like Johnny Mo that would resonate here in the United States and around the world, and certainly in China. Mm-hmm. But to keep it closer to this conversation, I mean, when we looked at doing these events, whether it's music or sports, you have to touch the audience in front of you. And the best way for that is we have 750 million users or fans that go through our devices, and we speak to them directly. When we create programs that get them involved, which also then educates, so whether it's games or guessing, or awards, which, you know, bringing 2-3 of the consumers from China to an event here in the United States or around the world. So there's a reason for it. We had acquired last year the rights to live stream the Grammys. And it was sort of last minute, and we stepped in and we took the rights, and the streaming was unbelievable. I happened to have been in China at the time, but we didn't have any time to do our proper marketing, and so we just quickly did a marketing campaign about it and who was there. And the Grammys are not very famous in China, but it's sort of known. But the reality was we picked up 10 million views that morning. Just with the minimum amount of marketing. Mm-hmm. And we picked up another 15 million during the 30-day period that we rebroadcasted it. If we had actually properly marketed it, which properly means getting our artists, and we have a group of artists that are contracted to our company that we work with, whether it's for films or whatever. You know, if we brought some of our leading singers over and they walked the red carpet, that 10 million would have gone up to 30 to 40 million. And an example of that, and when we look at these numbers, and we put it in perspective, it sounds huge for the United States. It is big, but in China, it's an okay number. Mm-hmm. What it was huge is that we had marketed 2 webisodes that we have. One is called Go Princess Go, which has made some news over here. And we saw a trend that went from 10 million to 50 million. By the end of the month, we hit 1.2 billion views. That's marketing, and branding, and getting
those are the numbers you're looking for.
Those are the real numbers that we try to go for.
And to actually just show how some of these things have linked together, one of the other shows that we own is called the Hollywood Film Awards, and that in inner Hollywood, it is the first award show of the year, and everybody shows up. Everybody. It is like being invited to the most amazing party. Like last year, De Niro won an award. I mean, it's like that every year, though, and it precedes any of the Oscar nominations or Globe nominations or anything else. So it's the first time that everybody kind of resonates with what's working or not. But 2 years ago, during this same initiative, we wanted to give out a Hollywood Breakout International Artist Award, and it was to Jing Tian, who is co-starring with Matt Damon in The Great Wall. And that just goes to show, that was 2 years ago we thought about that, saw which actress in China was kind of not quite on the scene yet, but making it, and it comes forward. And also, it's like looking at, when we talk about the red carpet, we had Li Weijia, who's one of the hosts of Happy Camp and has about 60, 70 million followers. It's, again, integrating what's important in the marketplace. Mm-hmm.
I want to throw in one anecdote because I think it does tell you something about the way the entertainment industry is shifting. We do something in Variety called Young Hollywood Impact Report, using Hollywood as a word to describe entertainment in general. Very typical of Hollywood to call everything Hollywood. I'm looking at the list, and we're trying to find young people who've truly impacted on the entertainment industry. So I start looking over at China, because some very big names have been proposed, but the last year they hadn't done things that I thought were that significant. There's a young woman in a movie in China called The Mermaid. The picture did $550 million. It's her first movie. She's on the impact list. And there are some big Hollywood stars who aren't, because they're not putting up those kinds of numbers. I think it's pretty interesting. Here's a 101 question for you both. In entertainment or in general in doing business with China, biggest myths and or biggest opportunities. What is it that people are getting really wrong or not seeing clearly? And what is it, if they saw it clearly, they would say, my God, there's an opportunity here?
I'll let you think.
It's too general.
No, I think it's a tough question because China has changed so much. I mean, I first started going there in 2003, and I think you were
We were
aware of
working
that.
together. Full disclosure.
And so the industry really, has dramatically changed. Where today it really is an industry.
Like, look, one number, Eric, the number of theaters roughly in 2003 versus today?
I'm second guessing. I bet you someone else out there would know precisely, but I'm going from maybe 2 to 3,000 to 25,000 plus.
Yeah, I think even more than 25. And then, I mean, just think about it. It's like the entire network of theaters in America was created in the past 10 years.
And that's not including AMC, which is owned by Wanda.
That's right.
But the fact is that it's a tough question because the industry has changed so much. And I think the greatest myth is, when I walk in to do or open a discussion with business here in the United States, the first thing I actually say, it doesn't matter if I'm in California or New York or wherever, is I don't have a checkbook. Because the idea is that when they read the headlines, it's a $2 billion deal or other things that we're doing, whether it's film investment, whatever it may be, is that all Chinese companies have a checkbook, and we're just buying. Now, I think that was the way at some point, but if actually you look back into Variety and all the stories that you reported, a lot of those deals never occurred. They were just discussions, and they never really matured.
Well, that's a good example.
So I think the myth actually is, if we look at our own backyard, a lot of these deals that we've read about or talked about didn't really happen. The way our approach is, and the reason I literally do say this, don't get too excited, I don't have a checkbook. The first thing that we want to do is find out if there's a strategic relationship for both our companies to be profitable and work together. And if it is, well, why don't we do that first before we write a check? So it's a method of thinking. So I think
Try to work together, try to cooperate
Absolutely.
on something to see if we like each other.
exactly. So I think the myth is that it was the Wild West, but Hollywood equally was the Wild West from another perspective. So I think that was a myth that's starting to disappear.
That's a good one. Mark, what if we take the other side of that in terms of opportunities? When you talk about localization, are there any examples of what that means for your company?
Yes, there are a couple that have, and I would say the reverse. Sometimes I think that people would say the roadblocks are too great to be able to get over that, and I would say on my dealings with people from La Music and La Sports and La TV, it's been the opposite for people with Hunan TV. It's been, how do we make this? Let's figure out a new way to do this. Let's figure out, again, in what you just said, let's figure out a way that makes sense, not just us throwing money at you. But so, I think that there is an adaptability, and specifically, I think in the millennial executives at the Chinese companies are they have no wrong way of thinking. They're just thinking forward. There's no past. So in a way,
That's exciting.
It works better.
Yeah.
So, and for us, we're in process with talks to localize the Billboard Music Awards for China, because the first Billboard charts will launch in China this year, which will be an accumulation of data from Tencent, from Baidu, from the QQ charts, and it'll be, when Nielsen and Billboard are done, it will be the true one chart of China pop music.
Wow.
So we would look at what we are looking at doing, the first awards once, probably at the end of 2017, and it would be, focused on China pop, and then whatever K-pop comes in and whatever big international artists hit. So it'd be a reverse of our show, where we do, not to, say the billboards are great or the AMAs are great, but we do big shows. They're 17 to 18 major performances is why we get every big act in the world, because when Taylor Swift wants 40 dancers, we give her 40 dancers. The Grammys says, Taylor, you're lucky to get on. It's like, do this or duet with this person or whatever. We let Taylor, Rihanna, Bruno, whoever.
Unleash the power of the talent.
Absolutely. And because again, it's for the fans. It's what the fans want to see. And in this world of, the diminishing results from television, it's kind of like, what are you going to do that they can't see somewhere else? So we want to give them an individual, unique, let's turn in now experience and or re-experience it. Like, do you want to hear Kanye go off? Did you miss that? You know, you got to see Kanye go off at the end of the show at the billboards.
Only live.
You know, and we have events like that all the time, and and it's integrating everything, like Michael Jackson. The Michael Jackson hologram 2 years ago, I've never seen more professional people cry in a room than when we unveiled that. Because as I was sitting there and watching all these people who were close to him, and it was as though he was right there and coming out of that throne.
And then the viral
footprint
after that.
that comes out of that. And this last year, just this last award show, you know, Prince, the tribute to Prince by Madonna. I mean, Madonna doesn't show up to do things like that. So it's being able to take advantage of situations and integrate them in. And, you know, and again, what we want to do in China is not just, you know, our show goes on, just like the Grammys would go on at 5 a.m., you know, so how many people are up at 5 a.m. watching it? So it's doing the localized version of it and being able to do the Billboard Awards in China and be based on, you know, the data that exists and the accumulation of everything. It's great. It's a fun thing.
And I want to kind of hit the pause button on something you said and suggest that the people here read something in light of what you said about the new generation of business people in China. The New York Times did a disruption survey studying their own business and the effects of disruption on publishing and a lot of industries. They did not publish the results because they're so bad. If you read that piece, which is in the New York Times, you just look up disruption survey or disruption report New York Times, read that and then think about what Mark just said about a whole generation who doesn't know how it was done and they don't have to undo their thinking. That's kind of interesting.
Well, we're having fun here in the United States because we're not only introducing the devices, but we're also introducing the concept of an ecosystem. And where the future of content bundles, whether it's the cable networks, if it's the Netflix, you know, the individual around the world and here in the United States, our fans are saying, why do we have to acquire for $175 this bundle of content when really I'm only going to watch one or two films that I want to see? Now, this is about 2 years ago a foreign discussion in the United States, not in China. In the last year that we're rolling out our devices and in conversations with content owners and IP owners and so forth, you know, again, we're not writing checks. You know, we're trying to install a new way of thinking that's best for the fans and the consumer. And what we're doing is taking what works in China, we took it to India, and it works there. We're taking it to Moscow, and it works there. And now we're introducing the ecosystem and the mentality of how content should be played and viewed and how the revenue is generated in a whole different way to this market. And it all comes, I agree 100%. I mean, the most refreshing thing in 2003 when I went to the first time into Beijing was the openness of thought, the radicalization of looking at something in a completely unique and different way that can be achieved because there is a lack of history and knowledge.
Yeah, it becomes an asset.
The way it's an asset.
Because the last panel was a little bit late and we've run a little late, I have one last question. Rather than getting into all of the weeds and a whole 2-hour discussion about regulatory hurdles and regulatory complications, I thought of a different way to ask you both about that. Disney Shanghai. Can you give me your assessment of what that achievement was? Are we in the early innings of assessing it? How big of a risk, how big of an enterprise, how important is that initiative? Because to me, that's taking the biggest entertainment company in America and gambling, if you know, that's my term, maybe not Bob Iger's, but gambling in a sense to create this gigantic multi-billion-dollar enterprise on the ground in China. Any thoughts about what the significance is of this place that just opened a few weeks ago?
Just personal, I think it's brilliant. You know, it's a population of 1.3 billion. They just obviously removed the one-child policy. You're going to see continued growth. We're focused on children, education, animation, family. So from a demographic point of view, we actually see this area exploding. I think what Disney did is what Disney does best. And I think it's phenomenal. And what you also have a large population of, a significant population, like 98% of Chinese residents who don't travel outside of China. So that means even going to Hong Kong becomes difficult to go to visit the Disney park. So to build something so enormous in the world's largest consuming society with the highest demographics of childbirth in the next 20 years, and they're right there.
No
Brilliant
brainer, not a
investment.
gamble.
Not a gamble.
Mark, any thoughts about it?
And obviously, I would say Disney, to me, has always been the premier brand builder worldwide, and they recognize, whether it was Paris Disney or whatever, that the world needs unique and localized execution.
So it's the ultimate example of localized execution.
Absolutely.
Good. I wish we could talk for another hour, but I know we're out of time. Thanks.
Thank you.